She was fired for using her phone for just 30 seconds. No questions, no explanations, no second chance. But the truth was, during those 30 seconds, her boss was dying inside a locked meeting room. The cameras went down at the exact moment, and she was the only one calling emergency services. Anna Carter stood frozen in the middle of the office floor, her hands still gripping the phone that had changed everything. The fluorescent lights above hummed softly, indifferent to what had just happened. Just 30 seconds, that was all it took. Across the glass-walled workspace, employees avoided her gaze. Whispering had already started, low and sharp, like knives sliding under skin. At the front of the office stood Richard Hale, the operations manager. He was a man in his late 40s, tall and sharply dressed, with a permanent crease between his brows that made him look perpetually disappointed. Known for his strict discipline and zero-tolerance policy, Richard valued order above everything else. He stepped forward slowly. "Anna Carter," he said coldly, "using personal devices during work hours is a direct violation of company policy." Anna opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Nearby, Clara Jennings, a senior administrative coordinator in her early 30s with neatly tied blonde hair and an anxious habit of pressing her fingers together, watched the scene unfold. She looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. No one did. Anna finally spoke, her voice shaking. "It was an emergency call. I had to—" Richard raised a hand. "No excuses." The words landed harder than expected. Anna felt the air shift around her. The office she had worked in for 3 years suddenly felt unfamiliar. Unseen by most, behind a glass door 2 floors above, Victor Langford, the CEO, was in a private meeting room. A man in his early 50s, sharply intelligent, always composed, known for never showing weakness in public. He had built the company into what it was today, respected, profitable, untouchable. But at that exact moment, something was wrong. Victor's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the conference table. His breathing slowed, uneven. No one inside the room noticed at first. Back on the office floor, Richard continued. "You are suspended effective immediately." Anna's world tilted slightly. Suspended? For 30 seconds? At the same time, in the IT control room, a young technician named Daniel Brooks stared at his monitor. Daniel was in his late 20s, thin, slightly disheveled, with tired eyes that suggested too many nights spent staring at code. He was quiet, observant, and often ignored by colleagues due to his reserved nature. But he had a sharp instinct for system irregularities, something that once got him sidelined after he exposed a minor internal security flaw. Now, his screen flickered. He murmured. A brief outage in the executive floor camera feed. Exactly 3 seconds. Then normal again. Too precise to be random. Back in the office, Anna clenched her phone tighter. "I was calling emergency services," she said again, louder this time. But Richard had already turned away. Above them, inside the sealed meeting room, Victor collapsed silently onto the table. Unseen, unrecorded. Because at that exact moment, the cameras went offline. And Anna Carter, standing below, had no idea that the call she was punished for might have been the only thing that could have saved a life. The office felt colder the next morning. Anna Carter stood at her desk, but it no longer felt like hers. Her nameplate seemed heavier, almost mocking her presence. Every glance from colleagues slid past her like she was already erased. She had expected questions, maybe confusion, maybe even one person who would listen. But there was nothing, only distance. Richard Hale returned to her station with a printed document in hand. The operations manager, still sharp in his dark suit, had an expression that mixed authority with impatience. His voice was controlled but firm. "This is the incident report," he said. "You will sign it now." Anna looked at the paper. It labeled her actions as unauthorized personal phone usage during work hours causing operational breach. Her hands trembled slightly. "That's not what happened." Richard didn't react. "Sign it, Anna." She shook her head. "I was calling emergency services. The CEO, he was—" "Speculation," he interrupted. "Not relevant to policy violation." Behind them, a few employees watched silently. One of them, Maya Collins, a junior assistant in her early 20s with curly brown hair and nervous eyes, looked visibly uncomfortable. She had only joined the company 6 months ago and still believed things were fair here. But she said nothing, her fear stronger than her doubt. Elsewhere in the building, the atmosphere was different. In the IT control room, Daniel Brooks leaned closer to his monitors. He was still in his late 20s, thin, slightly hunched from long hours at screens. His dark hoodie contrasted with the sterile white glow of multiple system dashboards. Daniel wasn't someone who spoke much, but his mind never stopped analyzing patterns. And right now, something didn't fit. He replayed the logs from the executive floor. A 3-second blackout. But when he expanded the data, there was something more disturbing. A manual override signature. Someone had accessed the camera system directly. That wasn't a glitch. That was intentional. Again, Daniel muttered under his breath. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. The system flagged restricted access attempts from an internal admin account, one that shouldn't have been active during that time window. He paused. This wasn't just technical failure. This was manipulation. Upstairs in a glass-walled conference room, Victor Langford's meeting had continued uninterrupted according to official records. Victor was a man in his early 50s, usually composed, precise, and intimidating in silence alone. But now, something was wrong with the data surrounding him. The meeting duration logs showed continuous activity, but Daniel's system feed told a different story. No motion detected after a specific timestamp, no biometric updates, no security pings, just silence. Back at Anna's desk, Richard slid the document closer. "Final warning," he said. "Sign or this escalates further." Anna looked down at the paper. Her career reduced to a single signature. "I didn't do anything wrong," she whispered. But no one responded. Across the floor, Maya finally lowered her eyes, guilt flickering across her face. And in the IT room, Daniel stared at the frozen data again. Something inside the system was being rewritten in real time, and the only person who seemed to notice was him. The emergency call that Anna made was already being questioned, but inside the building, something far worse was unfolding in silence. Upstairs, behind thick glass walls, the executive meeting room remained sealed. Inside, Victor Langford, the CEO, sat at the head of the long, polished table. A man in his early 50s, usually composed and commanding, now looked pale and unsteady. His tailored suit no longer fit his posture. His shoulders slumped slightly as if the weight of the company had suddenly become physical. Across from him, a few senior executives continued speaking, unaware that Victor's hand had started trembling uncontrollably. Then, without warning, his chair shifted back slightly, and he collapsed. No sound, no alarm, no immediate response, just silence. Downstairs, Anna was already moving. Her face was tense, her steps fast as she approached the reception area. "I need to reach the executive floor," she said urgently. "Something is wrong with the CEO." The receptionist, Lily Grant, a woman in her late 20s with neatly tied black hair and a calm, almost overly polite demeanor, hesitated. She had always followed protocol strictly, but there was something in Anna's voice that unsettled her. "I'm sorry," Lily said softly. "Access is restricted during executive sessions." "Please," Anna insisted. "It's an emergency." But before Lily could respond, security had already appeared. Mark Reynolds, the head of security, was a broad-shouldered man in his 40s with a shaved head and a rigid, military-like posture. He believed rules were absolute. Emotion had no place in his job. "No one enters the executive floor without authorization," he said flatly. Anna's frustration grew. "He's not responding. I think he's—" "Protocol," Mark interrupted again. 2 security guards stepped in front of her, blocking her path completely. At the same time, in the IT control room, Daniel Brooks froze. The camera feed from the executive meeting room had gone dark. Not delayed, not glitching. Gone. He leaned closer, scanning system logs. His tired eyes sharpened as he noticed something disturbing. Manual override commands had been executed again, this time with higher privileges than before. Someone was actively controlling what the system showed. Or didn't show. "This isn't a crash," Daniel whispered. It's a shutdown. Back near reception, Lily glanced at Anna again. Something didn't sit right with her. The urgency felt too real to ignore. Security feeds upstairs just went offline, she muttered quietly, more to herself than anyone else. Anna heard her. What did you say? Lily hesitated. For a moment, she looked toward Mark, then back at Anna. I don't know what's happening. Inside the sealed meeting room, the CEO remained motionless on the floor. The system outside showed everything as normal. Meetings still listed as active, cameras still marked as online, reports still updating automatically. But reality inside the room had already changed. And downstairs, Anna Carter stood powerless, blocked by protocol, while the only man who could have confirmed her warning was already unconscious behind a locked door no one was allowed to open. The warehouse records stopped making sense. At first, Lena Carter thought it was her exhaustion. Long nights of manual tracking had begun to blur the lines between memory and documentation. But when she cross-checked her handwritten logs with printed inventory reports, the inconsistencies were undeniable. Numbers didn't just differ, they changed, as if someone was rewriting them after the fact. Inside the restricted monitoring area, Lena sat alone at a small desk near the loading dock. Her limited terminal access allowed only real-time viewing, not historical verification. Still, she carefully compared every incoming shipment with her physical notes. A shipment labeled complete in the system was missing 3 pallets in reality. Another entry showed delayed dispatch, yet the truck had already left hours earlier. Her expression hardened. This was not error, it was adjustment. Nearby, Mark Dalton appeared more frequently around warehouse operations. Mark, tall and composed with a controlled voice and always clean appearance, now personally oversaw data verification steps. To most employees, he still looked like a stabilizing force. But Lena noticed something new. He avoided direct questions about discrepancies, and his answers became shorter every time she asked. In IT, Ethan Park had begun documenting everything secretly. Ethan, a quiet man in his mid-20s with pale skin, messy black hair, and a habit of speaking softly even when alone, had isolated a pattern across server logs. He leaned closer to his screen, zooming into access history. Admin override. Again, he whispered. But what unsettled him most wasn't just the frequency. It was timing. Every correction happened within minutes of Lena updating her manual records. That afternoon, a new presence entered the warehouse system audit team. Carla Jennings, a corporate compliance auditor in her mid-30s, arrived from headquarters. She had sharp eyes, a tailored gray suit, and a reputation for being emotionally detached and strictly procedural. Unlike local staff, Carla didn't know Lena personally, and that made her dangerous in a different way. "I'm here to verify system integrity," Carla announced flatly. No warmth, no assumptions, only process. Lena watched her carefully. For the first time, someone was reviewing the system without bias. But that also meant something else. If the system had been manipulated, Carla would eventually see it. Meanwhile, anomalies escalated. Camera footage from the warehouse dock showed a 12-minute blackout. Not a full system crash, not a recording failure, just a precise gap. Too small to trigger alarms, but long enough to conceal movement. Ethan's hands tightened on the keyboard when he found it. "This isn't technical failure," he muttered. "It's intentional deletion." When Lena mentioned the issue to Mark Dalton, his reaction changed slightly. A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. Quick, controlled, but noticeable. "Technical glitches happen," he said. "We're upgrading systems soon." But his tone was no longer reassuring. It was defensive. That night, Lena stayed later than usual, reviewing physical logs again. Carla Jennings joined her unexpectedly, standing at a distance. "You're the one under investigation," Carla said calmly, reading her notes without judgment. "Yes," Lena replied. Carla studied her for a moment. "You don't look like someone who would risk everything for stolen inventory." It wasn't support, it was observation. But for Lena, it was the first neutral sentence she had heard in days. Outside, the warehouse lights flickered. Somewhere inside the system, someone was still rewriting history. And now, with an external auditor present. The truth was becoming harder to control. The decision came without warning. No second meeting, no investigation hearing, no real chance for defense. Just a sealed envelope placed on Anna Carter's desk. Inside was a termination notice. Richard Hale stood across from her, expression unchanged. He was still perfectly composed in his dark suit, the same man who valued rules more than context. For him, everything was simple. Policy was broken, consequence followed. "You violated company protocol," he said flatly. "This decision is final." Anna's hands tightened around the paper. "That call saved a life," she said quietly. "You know it did." Richard didn't react. "There is no verified evidence of that claim." Behind them, a few employees watched from a distance. No one stepped forward. No one interrupted. Silence had become easier than truth. One of them, Maya Collins, the junior assistant with soft brown curls and hesitant eyes, looked like she wanted to speak. She had always been quiet, careful, trying not to stand out. But now she was beginning to notice something disturbing. The story they were being told didn't match what she remembered. Still, she said nothing. Not yet. In the IT control room, Daniel Brooks was no longer just observing. He was copying everything. Daniel was a thin man in his late 20s, usually overlooked, with tired eyes that carried too many nights staring at data streams. People in the office thought of him as background noise. But behind that silence was precision and anger. On his screen, the system logs were still being altered in real time. Someone was actively rewriting history. But Daniel had already created a hidden backup node, an independent archive outside company control. "Not this time," he muttered. Beside him, Kevin Ward hovered nervously. The senior IT supervisor, in his 40s with a strained expression and constant anxiety in his voice, looked uneasy. "You're crossing a line," Kevin said. "If they find out—" "They already crossed the line first," Daniel replied without looking up. That ended the conversation. Elsewhere in the building, Anna sat alone in an empty break room. The termination letter still lay on the table in front of her. Her phone buzzed once. Unknown caller. She didn't answer. Her reflection in the dark window looked unfamiliar now. Tired, but not broken. Just waiting. At the reception desk, Lily Grant watched her again. The receptionist, usually polite and reserved, had started connecting pieces she wasn't supposed to see. The timing, the missing footage, the sudden silence from upper management. Nothing about it felt clean. Something had been removed, and not by accident. Upstairs, Harold Pierce reviewed internal reports with calm efficiency. He was a senior executive with silver-streaked hair and a voice that never rose. Everything about him suggested control. "This situation is contained," he said. "We proceed as planned." No one in the room disagreed. But in IT, Daniel stared at the final copied log file and saw something new. A second layer of deletion protocol had been triggered, after Anna's termination, which meant the story wasn't just being hidden, it was still being actively cleaned. And whatever really happened in that meeting room was far from over. The backup server blinked once, then stabilized. Daniel Brooks stared at the recovered footage as if it might disappear again at any second. He was alone in the IT room now. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a pale glow over rows of monitors and tangled cables. Daniel, a thin man in his late 20s with tired eyes and a perpetually worn hoodie, barely blinked as the video finally loaded. And then he saw it. The executive floor corridor. Anna Carter running, phone pressed tightly against her ear, her voice silent in the recording but her urgency visible in every step. Then the timestamp. The exact moment she called emergency services. Daniel leaned closer. "She wasn't violating policy," he whispered. "She was trying to save someone." On screen, the footage cut sharply, but not due to failure, due to deletion. Right after Anna's call. Behind him, the IT system triggered a warning alert. "Unauthorized access detected." Daniel didn't move. He already knew this would happen. In the adjacent monitoring office, Kevin Ward rushed in. The The senior IT supervisor, a man in his mid-40s with thinning hair and a nervous habit of adjusting his glasses, looked visibly stressed. "You're still digging into this?" Kevin hissed. "They ordered a full shutdown on that data stream." Daniel finally turned. "They're erasing it," he said calmly. Kevin lowered his voice. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. Upper management is already reviewing system integrity reports. If they trace this back to you—" "They already know," Daniel interrupted. Silence. At that exact moment, on the upper floor, Harold Pierce stood in front of a secure terminal. Harold was a senior executive in his late 40s, sharp-featured, composed, and always calm under pressure. His presence alone made people lower their voices. He was not the CEO, but everyone in the company understood that he controlled what reached the CEO. A younger analyst beside him, Sophie Lang, a woman in her early 30s with sleek black hair and precise movements, hesitated as she reviewed system logs. "The backup retrieval succeeded," she said carefully. "But there's a secondary copy now outside our firewall." Harold didn't react immediately. "That shouldn't be possible," he said quietly. Sophie hesitated. "It was routed through a hidden node in IT." Harold's expression darkened slightly. "Find it, and isolate it." Back in IT, Daniel initiated encryption on the recovered file. A second warning flashed, then a third. Someone was actively trying to overwrite his backup. But it was too late. The file had already been duplicated, externally, secure, unreachable. He exhaled slowly. For the first time since this began, Daniel leaned back in his chair. "This is no longer internal," he said. Kevin looked at him. "What are you doing?" Daniel met his gaze. "Making sure the truth survives." Downstairs, Anna Carter sat alone in a quiet corridor outside the building. She didn't know what Daniel had found yet. But for the first time since her dismissal, her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. A single message. "You were right." And inside the company, the system kept trying to erase what had already been saved. But now, it was too late. The message on Anna Carter's phone didn't last long. Just 3 words. "You were right." But it was enough to change something inside her. For the first time since her termination, she stopped feeling like the accused, and started feeling like someone who might still have a voice. Inside a small rented office space across town, Anna met Daniel Brooks. Daniel was a thin man in his late 20s with slightly messy dark hair, tired eyes, and the kind of posture that came from years of working alone in front of screens. He didn't speak much, but when he did, it carried weight. He had already been flagged internally by the company for unauthorized system access, but that didn't stop him. He placed a laptop on the table. "We have everything," he said quietly. On the screen were logs, recovered footage, and system traces. Clear, undeniable fragments of truth. Anna stared at it for a long moment. Then she exhaled. "So I wasn't imagining it," she said. Daniel shook his head. "You were right from the beginning." Meanwhile, inside the company building, tension was rising. Harold Pierce, the senior executive with silver-streaked hair and a calm, controlled voice, stood in a glass meeting room reviewing internal reports. His assistant, Sophie Lang, stood beside him, composed, precise, but visibly uneasy. "We need to assume the backup data is still active externally," Sophie said. Harold didn't look up. "Then we neutralize it." Sophie hesitated. "And the employee?" A pause. Harold's voice stayed calm. "She becomes a liability if this escalates." Back in Anna's small workspace, Daniel was already planning the next step. "We don't just show the evidence," he said. "We control the moment it's revealed." Anna frowned. "What do you mean?" Daniel turned the laptop toward her. "A full internal meeting, executive attendance, live system projection. No way for them to erase anything mid-session." Anna looked at him carefully. For the first time, she saw not just an IT technician, but someone who had already decided to go against the entire structure of the company. At that moment, a new figure appeared at the edge of the investigation. Maya Collins, the junior office assistant, stood nervously in the doorway of Anna's temporary office. She was in her early 20s, soft-spoken, with curly brown hair and anxious eyes that always seemed to be watching but never interfering. I shouldn't be here, Maya said quietly. Anna looked at her. Why did you come? Maya hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. I saw the system logs being changed before, and I didn't say anything. Silence filled the room. I think I can help now, she added. Daniel studied her for a moment. You understand what this means? He asked. Maya nodded slowly. If I stay quiet, someone else gets blamed again. That answer was enough. Later that night, Daniel began building the final exposure protocol. Anna watched him work, her confidence slowly returning, not as anger, but as clarity. For the first time, she wasn't alone in the story anymore. And somewhere inside the company, hidden systems were already preparing to resist what was coming. But this time, they were ready too. The conference room was silent long before the meeting began. Employees filled every seat, unaware that today would change everything they believed about what had happened to Anna Carter, and to the company itself. At the center of the room stood Anna, no longer isolated, no longer dismissed. Beside her was Daniel Brooks, the IT technician with tired eyes and a calm, precise presence. His posture was slightly hunched, but his focus was sharp. And for the first time, he wasn't hidden behind a screen. At the front of the room, Harold Pierce sat with his usual composed expression. A man in his late 40s with silver-streaked hair and a controlled voice, he had built a reputation on order and authority. Beside him, Sophie Lang, pale and tense, adjusted her documents repeatedly, her hands betraying her unease. Everything was about to surface. Daniel connected his laptop to the main display. The screen flickered. Then the footage appeared. The executive floor. The emergency call. Anna Carter, clearly speaking to emergency services. The exact timestamp. Then the CEO collapsing inside the locked meeting room, followed by the system blackout. Murmurs spread instantly through the room. Anna didn't speak. She didn't need to. Daniel stepped forward instead. The system logs were manually altered, he said calmly. Camera footage was deleted in real time using admin-level access. This wasn't a failure, it was a cover-up. Silence deepened. Harold finally spoke. This is an incomplete interpretation of data, he said evenly. There are alternative explanations. But Sophie didn't look at him. For the first time, she was reading the logs herself, and realizing they couldn't be denied. A second set of files appeared on the screen. Internal communication records, authorization requests, deletion commands, all traced back to the same restricted management layer. The truth was no longer hidden. In the back of the room, Maya Collins, the junior assistant with soft brown hair and anxious eyes, watched quietly. She had been afraid before, but now she wasn't. Because everything she had suspected was real. The CEO's passing had been officially listed as a medical emergency without complication. But the timeline shown in the data told a different story, one where critical response was delayed due to intentional system interference. The room shifted uneasily. Harold stood slowly. "This meeting is over," he said. But no one moved, not anymore. Anna finally stepped forward. "I was fired for trying to save his life," she said quietly. "And I was punished for telling the truth." Her voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. A long silence followed. Then, one by one, heads turned away from Harold. Even Sophie stepped back. Later that day, the decision was finalized. Harold Pierce was removed from all operational authority pending investigation. The internal review confirmed data manipulation and suppression of emergency response evidence. The company issued a formal statement. Anna Carter was reinstated with full compensation and cleared of all charges. Outside the meeting room, Daniel stood quietly. A senior executive approached him, this time with respect instead of suspicion. "You protected the integrity of our systems," the man said. "We'd like to formally recognize your contribution." Daniel simply nodded. He didn't need recognition, just confirmation that the truth had survived. Weeks later, the company began restructuring its entire monitoring and emergency protocol systems. Transparency became mandatory. Audit trails were locked against internal deletion. And for the first time in a long time, the system could no longer be rewritten in silence. Anna stood near her desk again. Same office, different world. Daniel passed by, briefly nodding. No words were needed. They already knew what they had done. And this time, when something went wrong, someone would finally be allowed to say it out loud. What would you do if you were Anna? Stay silent and keep your job? Or speak up and risk everything? And if you were Daniel, would you protect the truth even if it could destroy your career? If you discovered a cover-up at work, would you expose it or walk away? Comment your choice below. Like and subscribe for more powerful true-to-life stories, because every story ends with one question: truth or safety? What would you choose?